next hour, I'll be reading from the March 25th, 2026 issue of the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. As always, thank you for joining us today. The highlights under business and finance are: U.S. stock investors showed themselves less sanguine about the prospects for a quick political deal to avert an oil shock, collectively pulling down the S&P 500, NASDAQ, and Dow Industrials by 0.4%, 0.8%, and 0.2% respectively. A New Mexico jury found Meta platforms liable for failing to protect young children from online dangers, including sexually explicit content, solicitation, and human trafficking. Meta's Chief Technology Officer, Andrew Bosworth, is taking over supervision of the company's efforts to adopt AI across its workforce. OpenAI plans to discontinue the app for its Sora video platform, a product that fell from public view after a splashy release last year. Enduro and Palantir are part of a group developing software to operate Trump's planned Golden Dome anti-missile shield. Dollar General tapped Ahold Delhaize veteran Jerry J.J. Fleeman Jr. to succeed Todd Vasos as chief executive, effective January 1st, 2027. Bank of Montreal plans to launch tokenized cash services that will allow institutional clients to move funds securely at all times. SK Hynix will spend about $8 billion on ASML supplied machines that print the tiny circuits on silicone wafers to boost its ability to make advanced chips. FedEx is collaborating with last-mile delivery provider OneRail to offer same-day delivery service. Tesla's monthly sales in Europe rose for the first time in more than a year as the electric vehicle maker faces intense competition from China's BYD. Now for the key articles under the Worldwide section. Trump said he was confident Iran wants to make a deal, even as frustrated U.S. allies in the Persian Gulf inch toward joining the fight as persistent attacks disrupt their economies. An Israeli strike on a naval outpost in the Caspian Sea targeted Russia's support for Iran in the war, hitting a supply line that the countries have used to move war material. High prices paid for Emirati oil that can bypass the Strait of Hormuz are a harbinger of where the rest of the market could be headed if the Gulf isn't reopened soon. Senate Republicans offered to fund all of the Department of Homeland Security save for ICE, trying for a deal with Democrats amid a standoff. Denmark's prime minister led her Social Democrats to their worst election in 120 years and faces difficult negotiations to get a third term. The NTSB said it was investigating more than one potential problem that could have contributed to the deadly crash at LaGuardia Airport. The Oklahoma governor chose Alan Armstrong an energy executive, to fill the U.S. Senate seat being vacated by Mark Wayne Mullen. Police searched the Paris offices of Edmund D. Rothschild as part of a probe of a former bank worker who was an associate of Epstein. The Taliban government released Dennis Coyle, a U.S. citizen detained in Afghanistan since early 2025. A Democrat flipped a Florida state legislature district that includes Mar-a-Lago. The picture on today's front page shows men and women sitting on what appears to be gas cans, waiting. And that caption reads, "Indians line up to refill gas canisters in Noida on Tuesday, as much of the world feels energy price shocks from the Iran war." And the headline reads, "Oil supply crunch is spreading from Mideast to rest of the world." If Strait doesn't open quickly, traders say record high prices will ripple outward. By Joe Wallace. For a glimpse of how much higher energy prices could still soar, look beyond the prices Wall Street analysts normally track for West Texas Intermediate in the U.S. and Brent in Europe. At the center of the supply squeeze in the Middle East, traders are paying an eye-watering $160 a barrel for the Emirati oil that can dodge the Strait of Hormuz, far above those global benchmarks. Those sky-high prices, traders said, are a harbinger of where the rest of the market could be heading if the Persian Gulf isn't reopened soon. That is because Asian customers are scouring the world for similar varieties of crude to keep churning out diesel and jet fuel. Benchmark oil prices sank after President Trump postponed strikes on Iranian energy infrastructure and said the U.S. had held productive talks with Tehran, raising the prospect he might be searching for a way to end the war. But traders warned that the talk might be another false start toward peace. They also worry that Iran must agree to an end of hostilities before oil tankers can sail freely through the strait. Unless peace talks pan out fast, record high prices for specific grades of Middle Eastern crude cargoes will soon cascade to the U.S. and elsewhere. The disruption is so massive, we will turn into full panic mode if this situation is not resolved rather quickly, said Helge Andre Martinsen, an energy analyst at Norwegian investment bank DNB Carnegie. A resolution means oil flowing through the strait again. Even then, for prices to fall toward pre-war levels, traders want to see Persian Gulf producers reverse output cuts from the early days of the war. It would also require long-term sanctions relief on Iran and Russia, Martinsen said. The U.S. has relaxed sanctions on both to soothe markets, but only for a month. Oil prices appear to move on every headline about the war, but in fact, it can take weeks or months for them to ripple through the complex logistical and financial system connecting wellheads to gas station pumps. Other articles from the front page follow. As U.S. seeks an Iran deal, Gulf allies get tough. Trump says Iranians are talking sense. Saudi Arabia, others weigh joining fight. By Summer Saeed and Jared Malzlin. President Trump said Tuesday that he is confident Iran wants to make a deal, even as frustrated U.S. allies in the Persian Gulf inched toward joining the fight as persistent attacks disrupt their economies. Gulf leaders' recent steps support the U.S.'s ability to carry out airstrikes and open up a new line of attack on Tehran's finances. They don't yet go as far as deploying their militaries openly in the fight, a line the Gulf rulers have hoped not to cross, though pressure is building as Iran threatens to exert greater sway over the energy-rich region. The leaders of Gulf states, particularly United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, are pressing Trump in regular phone conversations to finish the job and destroy Iran's military capabilities before moving on, Arab officials said. Saudi Arabia recently agreed to let U.S. forces use its King Fahd air base on the western side of the Arabian Peninsula, people familiar with the decision said. The kingdom said, ahead of the fighting, that it wouldn't allow its facilities or airspace to be used for attacks on Iran, an attempt to stay out of the war that failed when Iran began raining missiles and drones down on important Saudi energy facilities and the capital, Riyadh. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is now eager to reestablish deterrence and is close to a decision to join the attacks, the people said. It is only a matter of time before the kingdom enters the war, one of the people said. Saudi Arabia's patience with Iranian attacks is not unlimited, Saudi Foreign Minister Faisal bin Farham said last week after a series of Iranian attacks on Gulf energy infrastructure. Any belief that Gulf countries are incapable of responding is a miscalculation. Trump, a Republican, appeared Tuesday to confirm that the Crown Prince has been pushing to continue the war in Iran. Yeah, he's a warrior, Trump said when asked. He's fighting with us. The White House didn't respond to questions about conversations Trump has had with the Crown Prince. Trump said Iranians were talking sense, and that is why he pivoted to possible negotiations. They'd like to make a deal, he said. Special envoys Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff were being aided in talks by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Vice President J.D. Vance, and others, he said. On Monday, Trump wrote on Truth Social that the U.S. military would postpone his threat of strikes on Iranian power plants and energy infrastructure for 5 days because the two countries were having good and productive conversations. Iran has maintained that no direct negotiations are happening. Meanwhile, the Pentagon is planning to deploy a brigade combat team made up of about 3,000 soldiers from the Army's elite 82nd Airborne Division to the Middle East to support operations against Iran, according to 2 U.S. officials. A decision to put boots on the ground in Iran hasn't been made, officials cautioned, but the movement of the 82nd opens the door for President Trump to try to reopen the Strait of Hormuz by force, seize Iran's strategic islands or coastline, or launch a mission to capture the regime's highly enriched uranium, should he choose to do so. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Banks are playing both sides of the private credit turmoil. J.B. Morgan links to the private credit industry have never been simple. By Alexander Saidi. J.P. Morgan Chase Chief Executive Jamie Dimon has been skeptical of private credit. Lately, he has been getting a reminder why. Private credit managers are facing an ongoing reckoning as individual investors stampede out of private credit funds, worried about a downturn in software, a number of high-profile defaults, and restrictions on accessing their money. Managers have had to enforce limits on redemptions, with Apollo Global Management and Ares Management both seeing large withdrawal requests this week. Dimon recently ordered a full-scale inspection of the bank's loan books for exposure to software companies. Many unprofitable software companies have borrowed risky loans from private credit funds over the years, and earlier this year, J.P. Morgan told some funds that it was restricting their access to credit based on their exposure. More recently, the bank created new strategies for hedge funds and other investor clients to bet against companies with exposure to private credit. Since the 2008-9 financial crisis, private credit has been taking market share from the big banks, and Dimon has been among those warning about potential dangers lurking in the unregulated industry. Now, J.P. Morgan and other banks are paring back risk and sensing opportunity from the weakness of private capital firms that are simultaneously their clients and competitors. They're all our clients, but I'm shocked that people are shocked. Troy Rothbau, a co-CEO of J.P. Morgan's Commercial and Investment Bank, said last month about the continuing pressure on private credit funds. Bankers are dancing in the streets. The private capital firms are among the biggest fee payers on Wall Street, and banks, including J.P. Morgan and Goldman Sachs, have lent billions of dollars directly to private credit funds and unrolled initiatives of their own to get in on the action. The complicated relationship has led to a few awkward missteps. Along with J.P. Morgan, Bank of America had created a strategy for some clients to bet against stocks with exposure to private credit, but the bank quickly retracted it and apologized for the idea, with its research analysts later attributing the continuing downturn to media attention. This is a hypersensitive topic, said Mike Mayo, a bank analyst at Wells Fargo. But the disruption might give banks a chance to play offense against the competition. Tangled up in private credit concerns are broader fears about software companies being replaced by artificial intelligence. J.P. Morgan estimates that software debt accounts for around 30% of all private credit loans outstanding, while bank-originated debts hover around 10%. So far, all their stocks have taken a hit. NVIDIA uses war chest to dominate AI boom. Chip giant is investing billions to become the industry's top financier. by Berber Jin, Robbie Wayland, and Kate Clark. Inside the gilded reception hall across San Francisco's Wall Memorial Opera House, some of Silicon Valley's top executives and investors in late November gathered to toast the man of the hour. Jensen Huang, NVIDIA's globe-trotting CEO, had just donated $5 million to fund a production of a new opera, The Monkey King, based on a classic Chinese heroic novel, and invited a who's who of the AI industry to attend a performance. Champagne and opera, Wang joked in a speech to more than 100 guests from OpenAI and other companies. This is what it's like to be rich. The confab of Silicon Valley royalty was about more than just opera. It was about paying respect to an industry kingmaker whose company had become so flush with cash that it was bankrolling virtually everyone in the room. Thanks to the astronomical demand for its chips, prompted by the global AI boom, NVIDIA generates more profit than almost any other public company on the planet. The chip giant has used its fast-growing war chest to become the industry's most powerful financier, investing tens of billions of dollars in promising startups and supporting key customers who would otherwise struggle to afford its chips. NVIDIA says the deal grows the broader AI ecosystem, and they indeed provide crucial financial backing for companies crushed by the high cost of building the technology. They have another effect, keeping customers hooked on NVIDIA's products and steering them away from rival chip providers. Now for other articles within the paper. Jury rules Meta harmed children. In landmark case, state court holds the company liable for sexual content, by Aaron Mulvaney and Megan Brabowski. A New Mexico jury on Tuesday found that Meta Platforms, which runs Facebook and Instagram, was liable for failing to protect young people from online dangers, including sexually explicit content, solicitation, and human trafficking. The jury found Meta liable for misleading consumers about the safety of its platforms and endangering children under the state's consumer protection laws. The jury ordered a maximum penalty for each violation, totaling $375 million in civil penalties. Meta made 160 times that amount of revenue in its most recent quarter. The case was among the first to test questions about whether social media companies should be held responsible for the content posted on their platforms. New Mexico Attorney General Raul Torres said this is the first time a state has prevailed at trial against a major tech company for harming young people. The jury's verdict is a historic victory for every child and family who has paid the price for Meta's choice to put profits over kids' safety, Torres said. Today, the jury joined families, educators, and child safety experts in saying enough is enough. Israel hits smuggling in Caspian. Russia, Iran use world's largest island sea to transfer oil, wheat, and weapons. By Anat Peled. An Israeli strike on a naval outpost in the Caspian Sea targeted Russia's support for Iran in the war, hitting a supply line that the countries have used to move ammunition, drones, and other weaponry. People familiar with the matter said. Last week's strike was Israel's first ever on the world's largest inland sea. Far beyond the reach of the U.S. Navy, the sea connects Russian and Iranian ports about 600 miles apart, giving the countries a place to freely swap weapons along with goods such as wheat and oil. The route has become especially important for transferring Iran's Shahed drones, now made in both countries, which Russia has used to bombard Ukrainian cities and Tehran has used to strike airports, energy facilities, and U.S. bases across the Persian Gulf. Cooperation between the two countries has expanded during the war, with Russia sharing satellite imagery and improved drone technology to help Iran attack U.S. assets and other targets across the Gulf. People familiar with the matter has said. The most important goal of this strike was to limit Russian smuggling and show the Iranians that they don't have sea defenses in the Caspian Sea, said Eliezer Marom, a former commander of the Israeli Navy. GOP offers deal to end impasse on DHS funds by Siobhan Hughes, Olivia Beavers, and Natalie Andrews. Senate Republicans offered Tuesday to fund all of the Department of Homeland Security except for the unit that carries out immigrant arrests and deportations, moving to end a nearly 6-week funding standoff that has caused security snarls at airports nationwide. Democrats reacted coolly to the proposal, which didn't include new restrictions on immigration enforcement practices they have demanded, but said they were engaged in negotiations. President Trump indicated he wasn't pleased with the direction of the talks. The back and forth came as lawmakers are facing increasing pressure to reach an agreement soon, with lines growing at airport checkpoints due to unpaid employees at the Transportation Security Administration skipping work. Members of both parties are working to make progress ahead of a self-imposed weekend deadline. Before deadly crash, many close calls. Near collisions at U.S. airports persist as regulators work to eradicate hazards. By Allison Sider, Jacob Passy, and Dean Seal. Some of flying's biggest dangers are on the ground. In the past 5 years, there have been 26 runway incidents in the U.S. that the Federal Aviation Administration considers the most serious type, where a collision was narrowly avoided, according to federal data that covers both commercial and private flights. Another 52 runway incidents had a significant potential for collision, data show. Those two categories of incidents were down in 2024 and 2025 compared with prior years, after a spat of alarming close calls at airports in Austin, Texas, New York, and Boston in 2023. Last week, days before the deadly collision between an Air Canada regional jet and an emergency vehicle at New York's LaGuardia Airport, there was a close call at Newark Liberty International Airport when an Alaska airplane flew over a FedEx freighter as both attempted to land on crossing runways at the same time. Federal investigators said Tuesday they were looking into more than one potential problem that could have played into the deadly LaGuardia accident, including the automatic runway safety system and staffing. Sunday's crash, which killed 2 pilots and injured dozens of passengers and crew, comes at a moment of reckoning for U.S. aviation safety, long viewed as the global gold standard. Last year's mid-air collision of an American Airlines regional jet and a military helicopter over the Potomac River killed 67 people. Regulators have been trying for years to stamp out hazards that lead to close call incidents, from poor airport communication to poorly lit airfields to inadequate air traffic control staffing. The U.S. Department of Transportation has asked for billions of dollars of additional funding to upgrade antiquated systems. The FAA has said its goal is 0 serious close calls. The agency has been installing new systems to allow air traffic controllers to better track the movement of aircraft on the ground and to alert controllers when a runway isn't available for departing or arriving planes. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. From the editorial page, The Fog of Diplomacy in Iran. Trump and the regime test each other while ground troops head over. Diplomacy has reared its head in the Iran war, and both sides have their reasons. As the U.S. weighs taking the time and risk to reopen the Strait of Hormuz by force, the Iranian regime must weigh whether it can risk losing that trump card and bearing attacks for however long the Hormuz action extends the war. On Monday, President Trump delayed his threat to destroy Iran's power plants after what he called productive conversations and major points of agreement with Iran. The regime denied any talks had taken place. Such is the fog of diplomacy in this Trumpian war, and the reporting points to preliminary exchanges of messages via Pakistan, Turkey, and Egypt. Mr. Trump's incentive is to calm markets with news of diplomatic progress. The regime's incentive is to deny, and keep markets roiled. In that sense, Mr. Trump won this bout, driving a steep decline in the price of oil on Monday. This is what he does: offer relief as the trading week begins and bring the pain as it ends. The new deadline to ward off escalation is Friday, when some 2,200 Marines are due to arrive in the region. They may be joined later by another Marine expeditionary unit, as well as command elements and a combat brigade from the Army's 82nd Airborne. Call it Trump-style diplomacy. One hand extends while the other visibly whines for a punch. Will this regime again challenge Mr. Trump to deliver on his threat? And was that the president's plan all along? The two sides remain far apart. Mr. Trump reiterates his pre-war demands, including in a 15-point plan leaked to the press Tuesday: dismantle what's left of the nuclear program, hand over all enriched uranium, and limit the missile program. Iranian officials reiterate their pre-war refusals and demand guarantees, reparations, the expulsion of U.S. forces from the region, and the payment of tolls to transit Hormuz, an international waterway. All are non-starters, which explains the skepticism of Arab and Israeli officials. Mr. Trump said his envoy, Steve Witkoff, is speaking to a top person in Iran, widely believed to be Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf. He's the parliament speaker, former mayor, police chief, and Revolutionary Guard commander, and consummate opportunist. Some see his many political reinventions and trail of corruption allegations as sign Mr. Ghalibaf is the flexible type the U.S. has been looking for. Others see a brutal regime insider with no demonstrated desire to change Iran's policies. It isn't certain that Mr. Ghalibaf can even speak for Iran's regime. He's one of the more senior officials left, but will the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps follow his lead? How much room does he have to maneuver? Part of the reason to explore talks may be to find out. On Tuesday, Mr. Trump said Iran's regime gave the U.S. an unspecified present, as it had promised, related to oil and gas. This showed we're dealing with the right people, he said. But he also gave them a present by easing U.S. sanctions on the export of Iranian oil. The next step is to arrange a meeting, if Iran even wants one. The regime may feel time is on its side, the Strait of Hormuz is blocked, and Mr. Trump backed down on Monday. But before you blink, it will be Friday again. And with President Trump, you never know what he'll be saying then. He may not know himself. But we trust he knows that giving in to the regime now would leave an Iranian gun to the world's head, a proven veto on energy flows. The world, read China and Russia, might conclude he couldn't tolerate the political pressure at home from high oil prices. One bullet shot at one of our men or ships, and I'd do a number on Karg Island, Iran's oil export terminal, Mr. Trump said. I'd go in and take it. That was in 1988. Now he's president, and history and the world want to know if that boast is still operative. Iran's missile shots at Diego Garcia. More evidence that Trump was right to act before the threat grew. The rulers in Iran are hoping to move the war to a theater more favorable to their side, the negotiating table. But one of Iran's non-starter demands is an unconstrained missile program, days after the regime fired at the American and British military base at Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean. The journal reports that the Iranians fired 2 missiles at the base in recent days. One fell short, and U.S. forces fired a Standard Missile-3, SM-3, interceptor at another. The launch is the furthest ever attempted Iranian missile strike, the Institute for the Study of War notes. The attack demonstrated that Iranian missiles can reach beyond the 2,000-kilometer limit that the regime has long claimed to have self-imposed. Diego Garcia is about double that distance from Iran. That Iran is trying to strike the British-American strategic outpost in the Indian Ocean is a testament to the threat. For all the derision about a war of choice, Mr. Trump was correct to act before Iranian missiles grow in number, range, and accuracy. The reach also underscores that the missile program isn't merely Israel's problem. The Iranians clearly aspire to put European cities in play and eventually the U.S. homeland too. This should alert America's allies that their interest is in helping the United States, no matter how tired the Europeans are of President Trump's consistent inconsistency. The episode also is a reminder of the virtues of missile defense. U.S. systems like Terminal High Altitude Area Defense, THAAD, and SM-3 have demonstrated their effectiveness, and now everybody wants more interceptors. It's easy to forget that even shorter range air defenses were conceived in controversy, derided by the American left as too expensive and provocative to enemies, as if America would somehow be safer if it remained defenseless. The war is demonstrating how wrong those critics were. And the same logic applies to homeland missile defense. Mr. Trump is right to pursue a Golden Dome shield that can reduce the odds of a successful attack from a determined power like Iran. The shots fired at Diego Garcia are a moment of clarity about America's enemies. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. From the opinion pages, Trump was always a wild card. It's a fundamental democratic question. Does he represent voters or himself? By Holman W. Jenkins, Jr. Donald Trump set a 48-hour deadline for targeting Iran's domestic energy supply, not, as I proposed here last week, Iran's energy export infrastructure. Another near miss for punditry. Whatever the reality of the talks now supposedly underway with Iran, Mr. Trump is likely committed mentally to nothing except managing markets, and I'm still guessing, not mounting a ground invasion to secure the Strait of Hormuz. And yet a deal still seems the likeliest outcome. If you're a surviving member of the Iranian regime, your current lifestyle, hiding, fretting about your electronic footprint, worrying about your own people ratting you out to Israeli intelligence, is getting old fast. Those with high hopes for Mr. Trump's Iran action should nevertheless recognize how much they've been betting on luck. His war aims run athwart the Napoleonic dictum: if you set out to take Vienna, take Vienna. Disapprove of George W. Bush, but he took steps and mobilized the resources to make sure he met his stated goals in Iraq. Luck cuts both ways. Like history's most famous foreign policy gamblers, Mr. Trump is unlikely to quit while ahead. Meanwhile, the theologians of MAGA are in a tizzy, but they were always kidding themselves. Mr. Trump may understand the frustration of the white working class, I said in 2016, but the white working class can be forgiven for not understanding a creature as exotic as Mr. Trump. Far from being an isolationist, he craved the presidency to show the world who's boss, based on a very simple Trumpian understanding. America has the strongest military and therefore should get what it wants. In office, he doesn't tax or extend himself to win the confidence of millions of Americans who didn't vote for him. In his second term, he shows only a bigger propensity to bet on his commander-in-chief discretion without caring about Democratic buy-in. He's also a lame duck and getting lamer, and he knows it. This, I believe, is a key factor in his calculations. Even a halfway decent outcome in Iran isn't likely to stop Democrats from using the economic blowback to take control of Congress. But if Iran becomes Mr. Trump's self-willed domestic Waterloo, well, American mistakes usually end up looking like very clumsy, needlessly expensive, often misguided ways of ultimately prevailing. The reason is a political system that rapidly disposes of and moves on from leaders who've exhausted their credibility and usefulness. Then it will be time for a question that is overdue, except among certain NATO kibitzers. The question is all the more poignant now that MAGA has begun doubting what it stands for, or even whether it ever really existed as a movement. The question should force itself on us especially strongly given Mr. Trump's increasing aggression, from his tariff wars and Greenland gambit to his military actions in Iran. The question, is Mr. Trump really representative of the body politic that elected him? His first election, after all, was fluky, from the overcrowded GOP field and the overconfident Hillary Clinton to the out-of-his-lane actions of James Comey that likely put Mr. Trump in the White House. Had he lost as expected, would Mr. Trump's voice have continued to carry weight? His accidental first presidency, let's face it, became a phenomenon because of the collusion hoax. His 2024 return was also fluky, the product of a Democratic prosecution scheme to make voters choose between Mr. Trump and a senile incumbent. This shambolic effort collapsed before Election Day and bequeathed the unprepared Kamala Harris. If Mr. Trump is the most dominant president since FDR, as experts tell us, it's largely because of the vacuum of competence by his opponents into which he flowed. To understand Mr. Trump is to recall the negative capability that aficionados once talked about in examining a piece of art. What is the lack that it points to? America is a country that inflicts small disasters on itself, not Stalinist terrors and Maoist famines. It stumbles clumsily from triumph to triumph, a point lost on New York Times columnists outdoing each other in their trite formulations of Trumpian doom. My own presidential tastes, to be clear, run in an Eisenhowerly or Reaganite direction. In a pinch, I'll take a Nixon or a Truman. But however weird the codependency of Mr. Trump and his Clouseau-like opponents, little has been damaged that really matters. Foremost is survival of a citizenry imbued with freedom, enterprise, and a sense of personal possibility. The U.S. seems on track to remain the world's premier engine of innovation and material progress, despite a succession of presidents, each of whom was regrettable in his own way. AI titans work hard to discourage working. New studies demonstrate what should be obvious. Universal Basic Income Programs Kill Initiative by Jason L. Riley. All the confident conjecture aside, no one really knows how the revolution in artificial intelligence will play out in the coming decades. Is AI more transformative than the internet? Is it more dangerous than nuclear weapons? Is all of this just ignorance-fueled hype? Depends on who you ask. The economy has evolved over the past 200 years from agrarian to industrial to service-based. Automation in general has increased productivity, and technological advances have made workers more efficient and societies much wealthier. Weavers and bank tellers feared for their livelihoods at the time, but the Industrial Revolution led to significantly more hiring in the textile sector, and banks increased employment after ATMs were introduced. We're still waiting for the 15-hour work week and for people to start retiring by 40, thanks to the proliferation of computers, as some predicted in the 1970s. The rise of AI has initiated the latest round of anxiety that workers might be supplanted by machines. Dario Amodei, a co-founder of the AI company Anthropic, said last year that advances in artificial intelligence have the potential to replace up to half of the entry-level white-collar workforce and lift the unemployment rate as high as 20% within 5 years. Cancer is cured, the economy grows at 10% a year, the budget is balanced, and 20% of people don't have jobs, he told Axios. Mr. Amodei knows such talk won't win any popularity contest, which is one reason so many leading Silicon Valley entrepreneurs, including Tesla's Elon Musk, OpenAI's Sam Altman, and Twitter co-founder Jack Dorsey, have promoted universal basic income schemes to address concerns that AI will displace human workers. The idea behind UBI is to provide a regular, unrestricted cash benefit. Unlike Medicaid or SNAP benefits, which give poor people access to health care and food, UBI programs allow recipients to use the money any way they want, and eligibility doesn't depend on income or employment status. In recent years, more than 150 basic income pilot programs in 35 states have been initiated. One of the pilots, backed by Mr. Altman, began in 2020 and provided low-income participants in Texas and Illinois with $1,000 a month, while a control group received $50 a month. After 3 years of payments, researchers found that both groups worked slightly more, which may have resulted from the pilots starting during the pandemic and ending as the economy bounced back. But they also found that people who received $1,000 put in fewer hours on the job than people who received $50, suggesting that the higher payments provided a disincentive to work. Last month, economists Kevin Corinth and Hannah Mayhew of the American Enterprise Institute released a study of 122 basic income pilots that took place between 2017 and 2025 in 33 states and the District of Columbia. They reported mixed results. Employment increased in some programs and decreased in others, and the role of the pandemic was difficult to assess. The pilot programs varied in their design, data collection, and study quality, and only 30 of them provided employment outcomes. Hence, the authors counsel against sweeping policy conclusions based on the results. Most experiments were small, and the evaluations rely exclusively on survey data and are thus subject to reporting bias and non-response bias. Yet Mr. Corinth and Ms. Mayhew did find that the larger and more credible studies, such as the one Mr. Altman backed, showed that unearned income has a negative impact on a person's willingness to work. Whatever changes AI has in store for the labor force, it won't change human nature. Giving people money, whether they're working or not, is unlikely to increase the number of workers or make them more productive. President Lyndon Johnson's War on Poverty in 1964 launched the modern social safety net that a basic income guarantee would expand. What followed were decades of well-intentioned but disastrous wealth redistribution programs promoted by people who believed that divorcing work from pay had no significant downside. They were wrong. The welfare system attempted to replace family breadwinners, but it turned out that those breadwinners were providing more than money. The result of these government interventions was more broken homes, antisocial behavior, and blighted neighborhoods. Programs designed to help people get back on their feet instead became a multi-generational trap. Tech billionaires looking to burnish their image seem to believe that the work ethic is an expendable feature of a free market society. It isn't. If basic income advocates succeed, one of AI's legacies might be forcing future generations to learn these painful lessons all over again. The Pepper and Salt cartoon shows a Little League baseball player who obviously has struck out being instructed by one of his coaches, who says, "Losing is not so bad, so long as you've got someone else to blame." You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the March 25th, 2026 issue of the Wall Street Journal. We read from the Wall Street Journal every Monday through Thursday at 11 p.m. Your reader has been Corrine. Thank you for listening.